Today's session is how green is your ITIL. Most organizations are fighting the environmental impact of technology with more technology. What is needed is improved processes and workflow that embed sustainability into what everyone does every day and everything that they do. IT service management and the best practice guidance of ITIL provides you with a framework to do that. So that'll be the session today, and obviously Karen will get into more detail. A quick bio on Karen. Karen is an internationally acclaimed speaker with a reputation for providing both strategic and practical advice and insights for organizations in their implementation and maintenance of efficient and effective service management. Karen has been delivering presentations since 1999 and has been acclaimed as inspiring, thought-provoking, and insightful. She holds many accreditations, including ITIL Expert version 3, ISO IEC 20000 Consultant, and is a fellow of PRISM, which is the professional recognition for IT service management. Karen is a director on the ITSMF Australia National Board with the portfolio of publications. She is a member of the ITSMF International Editorial Advisory Task Force, working on the establishment of an international service management library. She was a member of the ITIL Advisory Group, which oversaw the creation of ITIL version 3, and the lead assessor for the Continual Service Improvement publication. And finally, Karen is the creator of the world-leading Eco-ITSM service. The objective of the Eco-ITSM service offered by Makanta Consulting Limited is to provide organizations with a measure of sustainability of service management processes, activities, and functions. She is a contributing author to the recent ITSMF publication, Greening Service Management, and has been contributing to several other service management publications since 2000. So with that, fantastic bio and fantastic background. We're looking forward to today's session. I'll turn it over to Karen. Karen, welcome.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Lisa. Wow, it's a bit early for that sort of setting expectations. But yeah, thank you very much. So how green is your ITIL? So we've all these phrases that hopefully you can see on the slide now: CO2 emissions, carbon footprints, climate change, green IT. They're all phrases that we use in our everyday language at work and both at home. What I'd like to explore is whether IT service management and ITIL, more specifically, can actually help us address those challenges that we're all facing. So in my agenda, I'd like to talk about what is the problem that we're all facing. Is ITIL green? And the industry is split, which is why I'd like to talk about that, which is quite interesting. And does it concern service management? And if ITIL is green, well, how green is it? And how can it help us? And then finishing off with, what we can go back into the workplace and do. And as Rick said, we'll have time for questions at the end. So there are numerous statistics out there about the impact that ICT has on the environment, and I've just thrown some up there. There's, like I said, there's many more around. The first one, ICT contributes 2% of CO2 emissions. That's probably the most widely quoted statistic from Gartner back in 2007. Interestingly, the climate group last year said that that figure is now growing at 6% a year. Comatose equipment, one thing I'll talk about a bit later, can account for as much as 15 to 30% of all the equipment in many data centers. And you'll probably find that that comatose equipment is the older equipment, so it's probably using more energy, and a lot of that comatose equipment is still sitting there powered on 24/7 to do nothing. One Google data center located in the US consumes as much energy as the entire city of Geneva. On one Google search for Soylent Green, it's the same amount of CO2 as driving a car for 3 inches. So just some interesting statistics. But the USA Environmental Protection Agency came out with some figures to say a single server is responsible for about the same amount of CO2 as a typical car driven for a year. So a server can generate 5.3 tons of CO2, and you look at a car driving 20,000 kilometers per year, that's 4.4 tons, a return flight from London to LA, 4.4 tons. So you just think about how many servers you have in your data center and your computer rooms and the impact that they're having on the environment. So that's the impact we're having today. There's also then predictions. According to Gartner, by 2011, i.e. this year, suppliers to large global enterprises are going to need to provide their green credentials via an audited process to retain that preferred supplier status. So the pressure's on us as service providers, because our customers are going to be asking us to demonstrate what we're doing in regards to our environmental management systems and our corporate social responsibility. If the power consumption continues to grow at 15% a year, it'll represent 40% of all global electrical consumption by 2030. And in regards to legislation, according to Global Sustainable Business, there was an article recently that said leading organizations, leading companies are now saying to government, bring it on. We're confused. We want to know if we're going to be legislated, if there's going to be a carbon tax, then please tell us what that entails, because then we can prepare for it. In Australia at the moment, it's a hot topic where our government are deciding what carbon tax is going to look like, and everyone's talking about the implications that that's going to mean. So there's another driver for organisations to be ready to respond to that and reduce the carbon and therefore reduce the tax. And 37% of organisations rate green IT as an upper organisational priority, expected to rise. So it's increasingly rising on the agenda for lots of different reasons. The leading reason for organisations looking at sustainability tends to be brand and reputation, an increase in revenue, increase in productivity, staff attraction and retention. So lots of drivers, not just about doing the right thing by the planet. So as I mentioned up front, the industry is split, or was split a couple of years ago, on whether ITIL is green or not. In 2009, the British Computer Society posted an article on their website that basically said that ITIL was not green. The article said, whilst providing the tools and processes required to determine IT's true corporate value, version 3 failed to address arguably the decade's greatest corporate challenge, regardless of industry, and that's the environment, and therefore represented a missed opportunity. As a growing number of organisations are now recognising that carbon equals cost, reducing landfill, increasing recycling and reuse, and driving down power consumption provide clear opportunities for financial gain. It is therefore unfortunate that the latest version of ITIL version 3 fails to address the environmental impact on IT service delivery. So clearly saying it didn't, or ITIL is not green. On the other hand, some other organisations and commentators, one being Capgemini, said that ITIL absolutely is green. ITIL Service Management offers an adaptable method for making use of existing processes to deliver sustainable IT today. Managers can make use of the ITIL lifecycle to integrate environmental targets into the performance measures of new and existing services. And Karma Wash said, IT organisations can tackle their energy consumption challenges as part of their existing ITIL implementation rather than some additional management burden. So clearly I'm here to say that I agree with Capgemini, I agree with Carmen Walsh that ITIL is green. I understand where the no's are coming from, because if you look at ITIL version 3, there is nothing explicitly mentioned in any of the 5 core books about sustainability, about the environment, about reducing power consumption, etc. However, I believe that, as these guys believe, it's implicit in the guidance that you have good processes that you will reduce your power consumption, you will reduce your impact on the environment, and that's what I'd like to demonstrate in the rest of this presentation. The other question I posed at the beginning is, well, does it concern service management anyway? So before we look at what ITIL actually says, who does it concern? Well, the CIO is concerned with reducing the carbon footprint of the organization. It's part of the corporate social responsibility. CIO is getting pressure these days from the CEO to support the CSR policy of the organization. Again, being driven by things like brand and reputation and revenue growth. The CFO wants to reduce the power bills, therefore you need to reduce your energy consumption. And the operational managers need to reduce, I need to reduce my power bills, I need to be able to implement new systems as soon as I can to meet business demand, whilst I'm already running out of space, I'm already running out of power, and I'm already running out of cooling capacity. Therefore, I need to be more efficient and use less space, less energy, and less power. So it is of concern to service management because it concerns all of those things, all of those people. So we've established that it is relevant to service management, and we've said that, well, ITIL probably can help to some degree. So let's look at, well, how green is ITIL and where help can be found. Well, you'll all probably be familiar with that diagram, the service life cycle, the 5 core stages of the service life cycle that ITIL talked about. What the framework does, it allows environmental targets to be built into new and existing services throughout the life cycle stages of strategy, service design, service transition, service operation, and continual service improvement. Now at Macanta, we've identified where sustainability can be built into every one of the processes that ITIL talks about. Depending who you talk to, it's usually around 26. Also, we've identified where sustainability considerations can be built into every one of the functions that ITIL talks about, as well as all of the activities. In this presentation, I'm just going to highlight some key examples. We just don't have the time to go through every one of the processes, activities, and functions. So I'm just going to give you some highlights where ITIL actually can support your environmental challenges. So we're going to start off looking at service strategy, the first of the in the life cycle. So as part of service strategy, we talk about strategy generation, when ITIL talks about understanding the marketplace in which you're operating. And therefore, you need to have a clear statement on your approach to sustainability within that marketplace. You need to know what your competitors are doing and be in a competitive stance from a sustainability perspective. You need to incorporate the organization's corporate social responsibility policy into the IT strategy targets. That's the way that the environmental vision and strategy can be cascaded down through the organizations and actions then delegated. It's also important to ensure that the results of that vision and strategy are fed back to the senior stakeholders in order to assess the progress and determine whether we are meeting the objectives or whether IT is becoming more sustainable. So the ITIL life cycle at every stage provides the means to monitor, measure, assess and report on those IT strategic sustainability targets. A corporate social responsibility balanced scorecard should be derived from the organizational scorecard, and the outputs used to measure the performance of each ITIL process that can be then fed in to the balanced scorecard. The scorecard is used to measure the organization's performance in adopting a greener approach to delivery of IT services. So it's the means to assess how the intended strategy and the realized strategy are achieving environmental aims. The other aspect of service strategy, the service portfolio management, is a prime activity or a prime process that service strategy talks about. What needs to happen in service portfolio management is that in addition to the business outcomes and the financial targets that are key inputs to to service portfolio management for new services, we should also have environmental targets. So not just the business outcomes and financial, but environmental targets. So when we are provisioning new and more sustainable IT services, well, I was to say those services that we're provisioning, we can consider them not for just their business impact and what revenue it's bringing, but also how it sits with our environmental objectives. Managers then can predict performance targets against those environmental policies before agreeing to commission a new service. So service portfolio management of the process gives us the framework to consider environmental considerations when we're commissioning new or changed services. There's also financial management in service strategy. And financial management needs to understand what an economic way to be ecological is. And its economic drivers can be achieved by ecological drivers and vice versa. So, for example, from a financial management perspective, educating business customers about energy efficient savings for servers and PCs and maybe offering rebates on energy efficient servers has a financial or an economic impact. At the same time, it has an ecological one as well. So they go hand in hand. Demand management can negotiate with power suppliers to get discount on power at off-peak hours. This then allows to be fed back into chargeback structures to assist with influencing customers to move their workloads to a time that makes both economic sense but also reduces the demand for increased capacity and ecological output as well. In service design, the next stage in our service life cycle, one of the processes that can really help work with the business around environmental aspects is service level management. So from strategy, new services are now going to pass through the rest of the life cycle. And service level management, while we know that service level management, it negotiates with customers and therefore must deal with both the business and supporting supply chain to agree service level agreements, operational level agreements and underpinning contracts. The important factor here is the existence of a joint corporate social responsibility policy. Where services are outsourced to one or more partners, and most of us have many partners and suppliers, the CSR policy needs to be agreed between all parties for it to become truly effective in supporting creation of more sustainable IT services. If the sustainability of IT services is a strategic consideration, and it should be, negotiation with customers and business users must be guided by the CSR policy in the organization. So by using CSR and sustainability in this way, the aim is to evolve the process of agreeing SLAs from one based on just business impact and price to one that also considers the environmental impact of an IT service. A key objective of service level management can be to identify idle services and challenge the business to reduce its energy consumption. So working with some of the other idle processes and looking at underutilized services or services that are no longer utilized and removing them, so therefore reducing energy consumption. Where organizations want to actively discourage energy waste and influence demand, service level management processes can apply financial measures to reduce the demand for idle services using things like energy surcharges along with demand management and financial management. So it's recognized that negotiating more environmentally friendly SLAs is complex for global organizations. The services are fully utilized over a 24-hour period. While some services will offer little opportunity to make savings, it remains a responsibility of service level management and continual service improvement to identify opportunities to make IT more sustainable. The other processes, or two of the other processes we have in service design, is service catalog management. Now, you can Include power output and consumption as part of your service catalog. You may want to consider that as part of your configuration management system. But whichever you decide, you can include that, so you can actually start to do some power metering, and you can integrate that into your CMS or your catalog so that you can actually measure power consumption at an asset level, at a service level, and at a business level. That means you can then identify a power-hungry business units, you can identify poorly designed services, and then you can do something about it. Now, the power-hungry business unit might be quite justified to be consuming that amount, but unless you're measuring it, you don't know what you don't know. You can also use the service catalog to influence customer behavior. In your catalog, rather than just having a description of the service levels and the cost of service, also provide environmental information on the goods and services that you're providing. You know, what is the energy consumption of the PC that you're providing? What is its environmental impact? And therefore you can encourage customers to purchase more, you know, greener products and services from you. Availability management. From that perspective, resources need to be available when they're needed. This doesn't mean, however, that resources needed for the peak periods need to be there all the time. Availability management can look at functionality such as capacity upgrade on demand, on-off capacity on demand, and backup capacity. These tools bring processes and memories online only as they're needed to ensure the organization isn't paying for capacity that they don't need, and therefore not using power they don't need to keep capacity running.
So we were up to service design and capacity management. This is a big one for sustainability, as you can imagine. Now, the ITIL framework provides us with the ability to plan how capacity is introduced in a more sustainable way. The guidance is all there in the service design book. Capacity management is concerned with providing the most energy and the cost-efficient services for the business. ITIL talks about the capacity manager being responsible for tuning activities, deriving forecasts, influencing demand, and producing the capacity management plan, which should include the environmental considerations. Key activities include trend analysis, planning, and modeling, and all of those activities are ideal for integrating the environmental requirements of sustainability and influencing capacity requirements of the business, encouraging reduced consumption, reuse, and recycling of capacity. We have proactive capacity management to plan the introduction of more sustainable IT services considering their environmental impact, and forecasting and understanding future business capacity needs and working with the business to understand what that's going to mean in terms of energy and power consumption. Reactive capacity management is enabling us to influence the demand for capacity today with assistance from service level management. So there's a strong relationship in ITIL between capacity management, demand management, and service level management. And that interface allows capacity management to influence demand via the service level management process. And by making use of that interface, it's possible to include environmental service capacity requirements in the service level management process, especially as a part of the negotiation for new and existing service level agreements. Therefore, it can influence or remove idle usage. There's a lot of statistics around as well on data centers and in the area of capacity management. One of the industry statistics says that data center servers operate at 15% capacity, which is crazy. You wouldn't operate a restaurant or a hotel and only run it at 15% capacity. Your IT equipment accounts for 30% of the power consumed. The rest is going to cooling, power, infrastructure, lighting, your environmental management systems, etc. So planning for that power is really important too. And it's also important to consider utilization of electrical systems, because as utilization goes down, so does efficiency. So, for example, UPS running at 50% utilization versus 90% is less efficient. So the old traditional method of oversizing to play it safe, is no longer acceptable. All that means is higher energy costs. And that, when I mean oversizing, it's just buying more and more capacity just in case we need it. We need a more deliberate management approach, better planning. So we need to review and formalize the capacity management processes as per the ITIL guidance. And in service design, of course, we also have supplier management. And we have to remember that we as IT service providers have to take responsibility for every one of the suppliers in our supply chain. If our suppliers are not providing green products and being green suppliers and adhering to standards such as ISO 14001, then that's our responsibility, not theirs.
And Karen, just a quick question there. So you've talked about, or you're talking here about capacity management, but you haven't mentioned virtualization. Can you talk about the impact that virtualization can have?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a slide at the end of the pack that talks a little bit about that. And virtualization is good. Data center consolidation is good. Looking at cloud computing is good. But again, it's like we said up front, it's fighting technology with technology. And there's a blog on the Mercanta website that the listeners may be interested in called Emerald Green to Murky Brown, which talks about, you've virtualized your data center. It's sparkly emerald green. You've got great PUE ratings and all the measures that measure power consumption of data centers. And then you open the doors and you let IT back in at it. And it's a bit like spring cleaning your house, and you let the kids back in and it all just turns it back to as it was before. So unless you have the workflow and the processes such as good change management, configuration management, release and deployment, capacity management as process and workflow for people to follow, you're going to find that investment in that consolidated and virtualization is just, you're not going to get the return on investment that you should have done. Service transition, again, just a couple of the processes that can help. One of the things we need to do today, if we haven't done it, is take a complete inventory of servers, the software and applications and all the interdependencies, and have a look at what you can remove, what you can refresh, or what you can virtualize. And we can do that in service asset and configuration management. You'll find that there's a statistic there, 15 to 20% of servers are orphaned, switch them off. There's an example, I think it's in the blog I just mentioned, about Sun Microsystems going through an exercise of pulling out redundant equipment and pulled out over 6,100 pieces of equipment that were doing nothing. They found that 4,000 of those were servers and 64% of them were powered on 24/7. By my estimation, going by the figures that they quoted, that was an annual power usage cost of $18.3 million to do nothing. So they switched them off. So have a look at what's out there that's not doing anything. Maybe have attributes on your configuration items that are energy labels, so then you can actually do a review of all your CIs, your hardware CIs, and see what hasn't got energy labels, such as your white goods labels, and look at either replacing or refreshing that infrastructure. And then you can choose your infrastructure using that energy label rating as well. Gives you a measurable environmental target. And as I said, you can measure the number of CIs in your configuration management database or configuration management system that has energy efficient data. In service transition, we also have change management, and we tend to evaluate changes on the potential business impact, whether it's a new service or a change service, and we look at its initial implementation over time, and we look at its financial impact. What we also need, all we need to do in change management is include in that consideration of the RFCs that we're being presented with, what's the environmental impact of this change? Has it been considered? And if it hasn't, why hasn't it? Maybe look at some scoring system. That's one of the things that Capgemini recommended, that you score changes based on their environmental impact and decide what will be approved or rejected. From a change advisory board perspective, and I would think that most organisations probably do this, but it's worthy of mention, change advisory boards don't have to physically sit face-to-face. They can be run, remotely. I've seen change advisory boards run over email, and it worked very well for that organization, or using video conference and teleconference that reduces that travel, therefore reduces the carbon impact or the environmental impact. Report on the number of changes, put some measures in place and report on the number of changes that were approved or rejected based on environmental impact, so you can take some mitigating action to reduce those rejected changes. And it's also important to remember that when we're looking at changes, we have to consider the life cycle or the lifetime energy footprint of equipment. It's not, we tend to just think about equipment and hardware in its operational use and how much that's costing us to run. But we have to actually consider the manufacture of the hardware, so the energy used to manufacture a server, for example, the energy then used to transport that server to your organization, the energy used by a server in operation over its whole life cycle, and then the energy used to disassemble, recycle, and remanufacture all of those components. So it's a whole of life cycle energy footprint, not just the operational one, and change management needs to consider that as well. Service operation, the fourth of our core books in the life cycle. Incident management, problem management, knowledge management, all again can help. In a nutshell, just one example I've got on this slide that will probably just come up in your screen in a minute. We've got the IT guy, tech support, and despite remote working solutions, how many times is he still getting called out overnight to go on site to fix something, to resolve an incident that he also fixed last week and he also fixed the week before? That's why he's driving a red Ferrari, because he's getting a lot of overtime. Because we aren't doing problem management, we're firefighting. And every time someone has to travel on site, whether one of our employees or one of our suppliers or our support people, every time they're traveling, there's CO2 emissions for that we are accountable for as well. So we need to get problem management bedded down, and we need knowledge management to enable people to resolve things remotely wherever possible. Continual service improvement. I mean, this just allows us to not only make financial gains, but environmental ones as well. And CSI, as we know, feeds back into every stage of the life cycle in terms of how we can do things better. And we just include sustainability in that. How can we be more sustainable? So we can identify improvements in processes or our performance and plan improvements that are going to have outcomes for existing services and new services. So they're the 5 core stages of the life cycle. And just very quickly, because I'm conscious of time, I'm going to run some other aspects that people can consider when looking at becoming more sustainable. People aspect. Consider remote working, which I've mentioned. Allow people to work remotely and reduce the impact. I had a statistic here that said 40% of US workers could technically work from home, but only 2.5% do. If those 40% would telecommute just 2 days a week, carbon emissions would be reduced by 52 million metric tons a year. So some big figures. So drive some behaviors, put policies in place about turning things off at night. Now you might wonder why I've got a picture of the Empire State Building there. Well, this was Climate Savers Energy Report. Their research indicated that if you turned off 1 million PCs for just one night, it would save enough energy to light up the Empire State Building inside and out for more than 30 years. So just 1 million PCs switched off overnight. So include sustainability in performance management, put it in people's scorecards, make sure you train people and build it into competency and maturity models. Train people how to be green. Don't expect people to do what they don't know. But also look at training options that reduce, again, travel. I've worked in organizations where there's no demand management around training, and it's just everyone just asks their manager, can they go on some training, and off they go. Look at computer-based training, which keeps person in the workplace, and also look at train the trainer. But also look at Can we consolidate all the demand for a particular type of training and bring training in-house?
And just a quick question there, Karen. So any other specific kind of prescriptive ideas or tactics that you can think of aside from the policies and procedures? Anything you've got to incent people to do things like turning those PCs off at night, etc.? Is there anything you've seen that's worked really well?
Yeah, one thing, it's a good question, Rick. One thing I've seen worked really well is what the industry is now called like gamification, the new flash word for being competitive. We can now put on our desktops there's some free apps out there that will actually measure the carbon consumption or the energy consumption of your desktop. But if you do that across your organization, you can be a bit competitive and saying, well, on an individual basis or a department or a location, saying who saved the most power, this month. I'm just encouraging people from a competitive perspective to turn things off. But when you have something on your desktop, and I have one on mine that tells me, what my power consumption is, how often it's gone into sleep mode rather than me switching it off, etc. And I can see week by week how I perform. So it encourages you to do things. Again, if it's not visible to you, you don't know. So encourage that competition, I'd say. But also include it in people's performance management systems as well. You mentioned virtualization before, Rick, and there's just some stats there that says, yes, it will increase service efficiency. And I've got a picture of a freeway, and I'm sure we're all aware of what happens when the infrastructure increases inside. People build a couple more lanes, and very quickly it just gets eaten up, and we don't really feel the benefit. And some of the industry luminaries, if you like, are saying, yeah, it's just going to get eaten up. And it's going to increase the complexity for configuration management as well. It does have its part to play, but just remember, you can't just fight the impact of technology with technology. And the very last thing I just want to talk about, I just mentioned, is carbon offset. Because people often ask the question, well, can't we just carbon offset? It does have a place to play, but on its own, it doesn't solve the problem. Carbon offsetting should be about offsetting the carbon emissions that an organization can absolutely not avoid. Just carbon offsetting to pay the right to carry on emitting carbon, it just delays the actions that organizations have to take. It's not motivating the organization by giving someone else the problem. So in summary, what do we need to do? How can we use ITIL to be greener? Well, we can embed green into the service life cycle at every stage, embed it into the organizational culture, make it business as usual. ITIL gives us a framework to measure, to monitor, and to improve, and include environmental considerations in everything that we do. Identify the quick wins. If you're not using it, turn it off. And remember, it's about the fact that economic and ecological gains go hand in hand. This is about saving money. It's not just about doing the right thing, which is great. It's about saving money and becoming more and more productive.
Excellent. So I'll just in case there's leave open for some more additional questions, and I think everyone does know by now as well that if there's any additional questions that you want to reach out directly, perfect, Karen, good timing. I didn't even do that as a plan. So Karen's put her information up here. So if you want to reach out to Karen directly, please do so, and either email directly to karen.ferris@makata.com.au. You've got her website information there and another website as well. So please, I encourage you, we always encourage everybody if they want to reach out further to any of the content that Karen's presented here. Again, in this short segment, it's sometimes tough to get to too much detail, and Karen's done a phenomenal job of kind of highlighting the key components of the ECHO ITSM. So I think that's fantastic. And as well, if you do come through ThoughtRock, you do know that we'll also put you in contact if an email comes into ThoughtRock and we need to put you in touch with Karen. The other thing to let you know and let your colleagues know, if you are ThoughtRock members, that this presentation, along with Karen's the slides and the audio, will be uploaded into ThoughtRock within, I believe, the first 24 hours. So that'll be available as well in our education library, which again has these types of assets, has self-study online learning, has all kinds of different podcasts, various education snippets that are available in the Thought Rock library, and this will be added to that as well as a great new component in terms of an education asset. So we thank Karen for that, and hopefully we can have her back as this continues to evolve. Karen, any other final points of, again, in terms of prescriptive guidance? And we're always kind of big on the prescriptive guidance thing. So anything else, if you had these folks for a few more minutes, what you'd say in terms of great next steps, in terms of regardless of political infrastructure or anything that's holding organizations back from being a little bit more green, anything you can say as a kind of a catch-all that people should be focused on?
Yeah, I think when you know, us as individuals, if we are trying to sell this within our organisation, is to remember that the sell point is that it will save money. You reduce power costs, you reduce energy consumption, you're going to reduce, you know, you reduce money. So it has the environmental impact as well. But trying to sell this purely based on, you know, let's hug a tree, it doesn't gel with the CFO and the CEO and the CIO. The other thing I'd just like to mention is that there is a book, an IT Service Management Forum book coming out. It will be available in August, called Greening Service Management. So where at the beginning of the presentation, those people who said ITIL isn't green, this is the book that answers that question. It was written by Ian Salvage. He's from the UK, and I contributed to the publication and wrote the metrics section. So that would be a good buy for anyone to add to their service management publication library.
Okay, great. And it's a good point on the you know, the bottom line pieces is that whatever you're going to do, obviously it has to have. It's nice that that we, like you mentioned, we all want to hug a tree, but the reality is it becomes a financial and a productivity issue. If there's things that we can do that can be green and in turn save organizations money and improve productivity. And I'm curious again, just from, I know you just touched on it there, but again, where do you see the growing movement of IT professionals working from home, either part-time or full-time, as part of what you're speaking of here? Is it an excellent green initiative? Because we know anecdotally that it definitely, for the most part, increases productivity and obviously saves organizations a lot of money, not only from a standpoint of wages, but also opening up the labor pool globally to any organization. Where do you see that, again, from a standpoint of that whole working from home movement? Where do you see that fitting into your topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a key initiative. I think some organisations, some of the sort of maybe more traditional older organisations, sometimes struggle with the remote working concept. One of the stats I mentioned before, you know, indicated that the potential is only being touched on in terms of people working remotely. But the evidence is out there that it's not only, you know, will reduce your carbon, the impact on the environment from reduced travel, but it also, as you mentioned, Rick, increases productivity, increases morale, and it's, you know, it's about not measuring employee performance by the time they're in a seat. It's about measuring productivity and deliverables. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I think it's a big. I think it's, you know, it's, for me, it's one of those quick wins. The tools are there. They're not new. It's not a major investment for organizations, and they'll, you know, like what, you know, we're using now, you know, with the GoToWebinar and stuff, all the tools, the remote working collaboration tools are all available. It's not going to cost an organization a lot. They've just got to change their measurement approach, and as I say, measure productivity, not hours that someone sits in front of a computer.
Right, and as you mentioned, the tools are in place now to however you measure productivity. The argument that you need to physically be able to see the person or touch the person to measure productivity is seems like such a yesterday comment. I would imagine you would agree.
Absolutely, it's about measuring results. So, you know, you set someone, you know, set your expectation. This is what you want delivered. This is the date you want it delivered by, and if that person does that in 10 minutes or 10 hours or 10 days, you've got what you wanted, and that's how you, I mean, that's an extreme example, but that's the approach that organizations should be taking. Measure people on results, not the hours that it took them to deliver it.
Right. Well, that's fantastic. So again, I wanted to thank you. I know we've probably gone over time here, and I know it's now probably approaching 6 a.m. In Melbourne, Australia. So we appreciate you coming on and doing this at such an early hour. And again, I know we do know that a lot of people also end up following up and replaying or referring people inside the Thought Rock community to these sessions as well. So I'm sure you'll get some follow-up and some questions, so we appreciate you doing this.